You're listening to 15 Minutes of Fame, Robert Phoenix.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? What's going on? It's Robert Phoenix here. That's me, broadcasting to you live from Flyover. We took the day off yesterday to memorialize our men and women, our fighting men and women who give up their lives in distant lands for corporate interests and other countries who tap into our men and women who are really just looking for a job. They're just trying, in many cases, just trying to get out of bumfuck, get some benefits. Am I right? I mean, this is a lot of what takes place when people enlist in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or the Marines. They're just trying to get by. And I think after a while, they wind up figuring out what the game is about. And it's not a life I'd wish on anybody. I had this post on Facebook the other day, and the post was about the Wounded Warriors Project. And the Wounded Warriors Project, of course, is there to help these men and women who come home and are really damaged either physically or mentally, emotionally, all three, and to provide some relief that the VA, which is a complete joke, never does or rarely does. And sometimes it can be as simple as providing them with a comfort pet, comfort dog, or perhaps even more sort of, involved in complex forms of intervention and treatment. And while the group is well-meaning, it does help these men and women. I put a post on Facebook and said, by having a group like the Wounded Warriors, are we not supporting the model of war that has existed for a very long time, thanks to the bankers who want these wars, need the wars for any number of reasons, from redrawing geopolitical maps to stocking the munitions and arms industries where they make enormous sums of money, to tap into the tax base of the taxpayer, whether it's in this country or other countries. The wars are needed on their part. But does the Wounded Warrior Project actually enable the idea of war? My 2 cents is that yes, it does. And I think a much more effective and long-term approach would be the No More Wounded Warriors Project. Like that should be an organization or a foundation that has a timestamp for going out of business. And there are people that have jobs through the Wounded Warrior Project. And I'm sure that they feel really good about the fact that they're helping people. It's a form of service. And I'm not saying it's a big business, although the books would be interesting to look at. I don't want to sound like a cold-hearted prick, but we have to start to really realign our ideas about war and who's fighting and why we're fighting and what are we fighting for. I mean, it's really a very fundamental piece. And we need to do it before it's really too late, and then our wars will be fought by somebody other than our flesh and blood representatives of this country, which may or may not be a bad thing. If we've got robots fighting our wars, who gives a shit, right? I don't know. I just think that I think humans will always be engaged in some form of warfare until we figure out the rift inside of ourselves. And the rift inside of ourselves is really the biggest, I would say, social denominator or collective denominator for why war exists, because many of us are at war with ourselves. And that's not any, brilliant epiphany. Many other people have had the same kind of idea or resonance with that idea in their lives. So it's not anything new under the sun, but it is true. So the more that we begin to become at peace with who we are, at peace with our choices, at peace with our ideas, at peace with our feelings, at peace with who we are, the less in conflict we are with that, then there's going to be less conflict in the world. Okay? And that's just the way it is. And then the left-right conflict begins to break down. I have people come to me and they will complain about, this person on the left or this person on the right. And, some of the complaints and laments are valid and true. Like I'm going to talk about David Hogg today. And I'm going to get into the left-right paradigm. And some of them are valid and true. It doesn't mean that we have to stay there. That is a temporary stop, right? It is not a destination. Deconstructing the left-right paradigm is not a destination. It is a temporary stop on the way to something else, which is the resolution of that. The resolution starts inside you and I. And that's an everyday event, an everyday occurrence. And that takes deep work. It takes very deep work. So today we're going to talk about some related items. There's some big ticket items. What's going on in Brazil? I don't know if they've resolved the trucker strike yet. I'll check in. I'm assuming Lynn is in the chat room today, and maybe she can give me an update. She's been following that quite a bit. But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what's going on with David Hogg and the die-ins. And I want to talk about Tommy Robinson. These are going to be the three big ticket items today. I'm not going to jump into Robert David Steele's accusations that army bases are the hubs for pedophilia, drug trafficking, money laundering. I don't know. It could be the case. It wouldn't surprise me. By the way, today is JFK's birthday. We're going to get into a little JFK as well. We'll squeeze some JFK in on the time tunnel. So I don't know. I've never trusted Robert David Steele from the jump. I don't know. Ex-CIA? Are you ever ex-CIA? I don't know if you are or you aren't. He's always sounded just a little north of nuts to me, to be honest with you. And I do too at times, so it takes one to know one. Anyway, so let's get into this Tommy Robinson thing. I got people sent me a bunch of emails. Oh my God, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Tommy Robinson's been arrested because he was talking about Muslims and pedophiles. And that his free speech was violated. Well, first of all, he's in England. And they don't have the same free speech laws that we have in the United States. They've taken care of that. They have the hate speech laws, and so it wouldn't take them very, very much to take somebody like Tommy Robinson off the streets if they wanted to. That's I don't see where that's that big of a deal. Tommy Robinson's been talking shit now for the last 3 or 4 years, longer than that. But in the public eye, through Alex Jones, we'll talk about Alex Jones as well. Through the public eye and Alex Jones, Tommy Robinson has become much more well-known. He's become a brand in some ways. Well, Tommy Robinson, that's not even his real name. His real name is Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon. Bet you didn't know that. But he does go by the name of Tommy Robinson. He's also known by the name of Andrew McMaster and Paul Harris. So he has 3 different identities, actually 4 if you count his name, his birth name, Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon. And Tommy Robinson co-founded what's called the English Defense League and the European Defense League. And he also created or was involved in Pegida UK. Tommy Robinson is a dyed-in-the-wool Zionist and has been from day one. How do you think he funds these organizations? Where do you think he gets the money from? Selling T-shirts? Like he lamely said in an interview that I watched, we funded 40,000 pounds by selling T-shirts. Yeah, right. Do you know what the margin is on T-shirts? You might make about $1.50 on a T-shirt. If you're lucky. And then you've got to save up all that money. You've got to feed yourself, feed the other people involved in the organization, unless they're working, which they probably aren't. So his little T-shirt story, while it might be true, I find it hard to actually believe 100%. Excuse me. Tommy Robinson's been on the record as being a Zionist. There's an interview I could play you right now. Tommy Robinson talking about him being a Zionist. Now, is it a crime to be a Zionist? No, you can be a Zionist if you want. You can be anything. You can be a Zionist. You can be a social Marxist. You can be a libertarian. You can be a Republican. You can be a Democrat. You can be an agnostic. You can be an atheist. You could be whatever. But when you align yourself with certain groups and social forces, you begin to interpret what they are and how they impact the rest of us. And it seems as though nationalism now has become tied to the hip with Zionism, which is unfortunate. It's like, here's the deal, the handshake deal. Oh yeah, you want to be nationalist? Sure. But you got to be Zionist too. That's the trade-off, right? At least so it seems. And I think as Americans, that's one of the things that, if we still see ourselves as Americans and we're living, I'm here, I'm in Texas, this is the United States of America. So by definition, at least at that level, I'm an American. I transcend that. Everybody can transcend that. And we can move beyond this idea of being Americans or whatever, because that's where the real like sexy sauce is, right? But in order to do that, there has to be a lot of work involved. To come to that conclusion, then you have to have responsibility to kind of back that up at the same time. It's not an easy thing to do. Well, some people say we just flip a switch and you're gone. Well, maybe so. Seemed to work out for Eckhart Tolle. You just go find a park bench somewhere and sit on it for a couple days. For some people, that hasn't really worked out. And there are cases of that, people actually doing that and their lives going to shit. I kid you not. So when Tommy Robinson gets arrested, people start sending me emails. Isn't this awful? Isn't this awful? Isn't this awful? No, I don't think it is. First of all, Tommy Robinson is involved with all the Islamophobes, like Pamela Geller, Mark Levine. I mean, these people, just Daniel Pipes, they're all like Islamophobists. And they've created, it's just like, okay, don't look over here at the atrocities that Israel is committing. Don't look over here because AIPAC is siphoning and funneling hundreds of millions of dollars to create legislation and lobbying and all the other things that go along with, all the tricks and all the magic tricks of K Street. Right? Don't look over there. Don't look over at all the surveillance and the espionage and the information gathering that Talpiot and Variant and all these subgroups that are connected to the NSA, that they're doing. No, don't look over there. What you really want to look at is you want to look at all these crazy, rabid, foaming Muslims. Now, that's not to say that there aren't sects of Islam that are as aggressive and extreme as the Zionists, and there are. And we've done everything in our power as a nation to light that fuse and completely blow it all up. So that, what do we have? Think of like a angry hornet's nest. You just keep poking it, right? What are you going to get? You're going to get angry hornets. And then, okay, so what are we going to do with those angry hornets? Well, let's capture them. It's just like the African bees. Let's bring the African bees to like South America, and they're going to get out, and they got out, and they're all over the place in North America, proliferating, and at some point they'll eventually become, I guess, assimilated. Who knows what's going to go on with those bees? But it's the same deal. Let's just bring them over, right? Let's bring these angry, pissed off people who we've been bombing and droning really since 2001, and even before that. We'd go into Iraq. We were doing sorties and strafing Iraq when Bill Clinton was president. The war in Iraq never ended when just because George H.W. Bush was no longer president. No, we were still over there. We were flying all over Iraq. They had sanctions. Put the hammer down. So then you bring these people over, and some of them are going to be angry. Some of them are going to be pissed off. And some of them are going to organize, and some of them do have ties to the deep state, intel, and the CIA, and the FBI. And then they're, kind of rounded up and whipped up, and the next thing you know, you got somebody who's engaged in some form of terror. So these things are real because this is what's happened. But by and large, and I'm not a Muslim apologist, nor am I an Islamophobe. I have spent time around Muslims. Some of them, I had a neighbor when I was living in Austin, super nice guy. Helped me out with some stuff with my car. Super nice guy. Don't get me wrong, right? So this idea that all Muslims are evil, it's another one of these ideas that's promulgated to create the other. And again, I'm not saying that there aren't issues. There are certainly some issues. And the issues have to do with the extremism that's involved. Tommy Robinson, Pamela Geller, Mark Levine, they've all been deployed to work the anti-Muslim angle as a diversion, as a point of conflict and strife so they can get money, so on and so on and so on. I've never bought Tommy Robinson's act from the beginning. I remember watching him getting involved with these fights with these Muslim guys on Alex Jones, and Alex Jones loves Tommy Robinson. Oh my God. He loves him some Tommy Robinson. Because Tommy Robinson is a little like Alex Jones in some ways. They're both short, both feisty. By the way, Alex Jones is completely laying down on these Sandy Hook lawsuits, isn't he? That's another time. We'll investigate that. We'll return to the scene of that crime at some point in time. I remember watching Alex Jones getting all fired up about Tommy Robinson and trying to set him up as like his, English bureau for InfoWars. He was giddy at the idea that Tommy Robinson would be like his doppelganger in England. And then I remember him talking to Paul Joseph Watson about it. And you should have seen the look on Paul Joseph Watson's face. He was not happy. Clearly, PJW does not like Tommy Robinson because he knows what he's about. And I'm not. Paul Joseph Watson's probably no paragon of virtue either. I remember watching him do an interview with this young gal. Who the hell knows who she was? And he was talking about how screwed up the alt-right is. They were talking about, there's just the political failings of the alt-right. Well, InfoWars banked on the alt-right. They became the alt-right during the run-up to the election, and now they want to distance themselves from being alt-right. You watch these things over time, and you can see the disingenuous nature of even the alternative media. They're no different in many cases than mainstream media. So Tommy Robinson, let me shed some crocodile tears for Tommy Robinson. What's the effect? Well, it's the effect that it's going to politicize and widen the gap and create more strife because of Islamophobia. To me, it's a representative of another false flag, which is what the title of this show is about today. That it's a false flag. He'll get out. He'll probably get out within, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks, maybe. He'll be back on the streets, or I don't know what his status is going to be, but just know who he is, know who he's working for, know what the agenda is. Like, right? Keep your eye on the ball. Nothing is always as it seems. Yes, is it a major, you know, people are saying, "Oh, this is the turning point. This is the turning point. This is it. They've gone too far. This is going to wake us up." I don't know if it's going to wake us up. Turning point for what? Mass insurrection? Are they going to go, flood the Queen's palace? Are they going to take her out? Hang her in the streets? Is that what's going to happen? Good luck on that. She's one of the most powerful people in the world, in a dark way. Comes out of the black nobility of Venice. We're going to do a show, maybe this Friday. We'll get into the black nobility of Venice. This is connected to John Coleman's Council of 300, and who really runs the world, and how long they've been running it for a very long time. So don't get all worked up about Tommy Robinson. It's not a turning point. It's not a rallying cry. It's only a rallying cry and a turning point if you believe his story, and his story is not a real story. It's not. Trump was elected due to a large part by Islamophobia. And I talked about this during the run-up of the election. And it was like, yeah, of course, we have a problem because we've created the problem now. We created ISIS. We created a radical faction of Islam. That was the goal the whole time. And yes, some of the elements have now come home because we have no problem bringing in thousands and thousands of refugees, some of which are from that area. Many of those have gone to Northern Europe, Western Europe. We seem to be getting a lot of North Africans and West Africans here at this point in terms of the immigration process, Sudanese, Somalians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is what Trump capitalized on in the run-up to the election, which was these events where something happened somewhere, and he was able to decry Islam and use it as a force to motivate his base. But he hasn't done shit since then. He used it as a tool to get elected. And when you look back on everything that Trump did during the election now, in terms of hindsight and WikiLeaks and the October surprise, which is what it was, you begin to see a very, very different picture. And you begin to see a picture of a campaign that was infused with a number of events so that Trump could get almost kind of electrically charged and wake up the electorate, wake up the sleeping silent majority. And it worked, totally worked. But he hasn't done anything since then. If he had come clean and really made true on his promises, his campaign promises, it would be, I wouldn't have a problem with some of it. Like the ridiculous travel ban that he had, that was so ridiculous. He was like, let's start off and let's just have a roaring defeat from day one. First of all, Saudi Arabia was not a part of the travel ban, and they should have been. They should have been part of the travel ban, but they weren't anywhere close to that travel ban. And he could have banned certain groups or people without even having to go through and make a big effing deal about that whole experience. He could have done it. I mean, the pieces were in place legally from a presidential standpoint. He could have had an executive order. Could have done an executive order. It would have been fine. But no, he had to make a big deal out of it, and it was actually a defeat. But he essentially was fueled by a lot of anti-Islamic rhetoric. And I look, if you're an American and all of a sudden you see your town turn into, a tiny version of Hyderabad, I mean, what are you going to do? You're looking at this is too much. Like, I don't know what it's like to live in Dearborn. I can only imagine. And if you're an American living in Dearborn, you're like, what the hell happened to my country? What happened to and if you're an open borders person, oh man, you're loving that, right? Wow, this is great. The problem with the open borders thing is that, if you're a multinational, you don't mind the open borders because you can open a McDonald's in Riyadh as long as you're not serving pork. But let's say you are Joe and Jenny Schmo and you want to open an espresso company or espresso place in Riyadh, and you don't really have any papers or anything really establishing you as being able to do that. You may not even speak the language. Well, good luck with that. See, that's the problem with the no borders thing. It's like, okay, well, we're going to spread democracy, which is the disease of a crumbling empire, to be honest with you. But we'll take in everybody else, and that's the trade-off. But if the people themselves want to go do something, go to Mexico. Go try going to Mexico and doing something in Mexico. Let's say, 1,500, 2,000 people all go to Mexico together and they stay there. What do you think the Mexican government's going to do? Throw your ass in jail. So I could see why people would look at that and say, shit, this guy's talking our language. I'm going to vote for him because nobody else is talking about it. And just let it all happen. Capitalize on it. That's what politicians do. We capitalize on people's fears, insecurities, pain, hope. It's all the same game. They all do it the same. Speaking of politics, why don't we just kind of shuffle on over to David Hogg? What's going on with David Hogg? The latest with David Hogg now is he's leading die-ins. The latest victim of David Hogg's social activism, fueled no doubt by Barack Obama and the Alinsky model on the left, is to bring people into Publix markets in Florida and have them dying to represent the deaths of students who have suffered at the hands of a bullet in a public school. And there are pictures of people just going by, shopping, stepping over the bodies. If David Hogg has become the face and the voice of the left, I'm telling you right now, the left is totally screwed. They're totally screwed. This is the end of the line. What do you think people are going to do when they look at that? And people may be asleep at times. They may be victims of their own or society's traumatization. But by and large, people have an innate sense. And they're going to look at this and go, okay, they're Democrats, apparently. Is this what we want for our future? Like they're going all in, and they're trying to capture and catalyze this number for voters around the youth. And these are kids that are 17, about to turn 18, and they're trying desperately to get in their heads, get them to register to vote, and create a new voter base from this point forward, so they can have this base for the next, 20 years. And it's a big gamble. And I'm not sure it's going to work. Because when people look at that, whether they know who David Hogg really is, what his background is, what his father's background is, the connection to that company, in Florida, cubic communication. Do they really know or understand that? Probably don't. But what they do know is that that's not the world that they want to live in. Like, they want to go to the market and they want to be able to spend their money. And that's it. And they see that and they just, no, I'm not with this. I'm not down with this. So congratulations, David Hogg. Congratulations, the left. You are continuing to alienate more and more people as you do your very best to dismantle the Second Amendment, First Amendment, widen the gap, create more duality, more polarity, and somehow energize and catalyze a young voter base that you think is going to make a difference in November and beyond. It's a total fail. Total fail. Total endgame fail. And you begin to wonder, really, if the left has any investment at all in being a voice of continuity, constancy, and for the American people, which it once was. The Democrats stood up for the common man. That was their role, right? If something was going to something happen in the environment, well, the left was there to say, look, this is bullshit. We've got to curb the corporate crime of violating the environment. We don't want to shut your corporation down, but look at what you're doing to the surrounding area. Clean it up. So what? You make an eighth of a less profit by doing that. Suck it up. The conditions for workers. The left always stood up for that. And there's certain things that the left really played a role in terms of this counterbalance, right? But now they're out. They're not out. They're out of all that. Now they're just invested in identity politics, isolation, alienation. It's like they've just taken everything from Obama and everything from Saul Alinsky and just thrown it all in, and it's not going to work. And so what will we be left with? We might be left with an ongoing version of this emerging nationalism that's tied to Zionism. And again, I've clearly stated that there are two sides to this. There's the nationalist Zionist side, and then there's the socialist neoliberal side. The social market. These are the two models that we've been given. You can choose one or the other, and neither of them are great choices, to be quite honest with you. My 2 cents, my opinion here. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in Brazil as well. Let me check in with the chat room. Let's see if Lynn is in there. She can give us any updates. Chat is buzzing today. Totally buzzing. There's a lot going on there. What do we got? Maury says, good morning. Yep, mostly that would be right, Robert. Good morning. Your title does pique my interest. Our foreign policy has been war for the last damn near 20 years this time around. Historically, we've been at a big time for about 100 years. Yep. Wahhabism. So I was just trying to see if Lynn is in there. Why has it been so difficult to get a real DOB for the Hogg? I know, exactly, right, Steve? Somebody's not cracking the database there. Someone should trip over one of them and fall and injure themselves. Our litigious society would revel in that. Don't think that won't happen, Maury. Now they're planning on doing a die-in at one of the Trump hotels. I was reading Hogg's Twitter feed last night. And you get these useful idiots. Look, if I was young, I may not be into Trump. Seriously, if I was that age, I'd look at him like, So I get it. But having to die-in at his hotels, good luck with that. Good luck with that. That's a private, like Publix is Publix is a private establishment. That's a private. It's not like you're dining in the street. or having your dying in the street. We have the right to assemble, but private property begins to determine where that demarcation and that line is. And you can do it, and you'll be removed, and maybe that's what you want. You want to have people, forcibly remove you. Boy, isn't that good press? But good luck on that. Good luck on that. Okay, we're going to get into the Brazil thing. Now, apparently, let me just here, before I get into this, I need to just check the headlines here. Let me just see what's happening. I don't want to talk about it unless it's still going on, but I will comment on it to some extent. So let's just see what's happening with the Brazilian trucker strike. Trucker strike paralyzes Brazil as president courts investors. Brazil truck strike continues despite deal. Brazil trucker strike shows a state running on empty. Brazil struggles after week-long trucker strike. Let's read this. This is from Al Jazeera. Let's just get caught up to speed. This is 4 hours ago, because they say a deal has been struck. So let's see what's happening here. A nationwide trucker strike in Brazil over soaring fuel prices that has crippled the Brazilian economy has entered a ninth day. Brazil's government said it reached an agreement with the main truck drivers union late on Sunday, so they had a resolution to the strike. But a significant number of drivers continued to protest early on Tuesday. Brazilian President Michel Temer caved into the strikers' main demand and agreed to cut the diesel price by 0.46 reais per liter, a 10% reduction for 60 days. But that doesn't sound like much of a resolution. The truckers are angry over the rise in diesel costs from 3.36 reais, which is 0.92 cents a liter in January, to 3.6 reais, 0.96 before the strike, and then it went from 92 to $1 per liter. So $1 per liter, which is expensive. A liter's less than a gallon, right? So throughout this week, my government has always been open to dialogue, said Temer on Twitter. We have done our part to alleviate problems and sufferings. Protesting drivers have been blocking roads across the country, with many gas stations running out of fuel and some food items in short supply. More than 550 road blockages by truckers were mounted across 24 of the country's 27 states, the Federal Highway Police said. Shortages of aviation fuel shuttered 8 airports, so they couldn't get aviation fuel to the airports. Traffic to the huge Santos seaport near Sao Paulo, which receives roughly 10,000 trucks a day, was almost non-existent. Hospitals in Rio and Sao Paulo had to cancel non-urgent surgeries, and at least 13 states reported scrapping university classes. More than a strike, what's taken many by surprise is how quickly a country as well developed as Brazil, the 7th largest economy in the world, can be brought to its knees, said Al Jazeera's Daniel Schweimler, reporting from Sao Paulo. But for many of the protesters, the strike is not just about rising fuel prices. This used to be a strike, Maximilio Viana, a protesting truck driver, said. Now it's more than a strike. Brazil has realized that we can't keep going with these politicians who, over the years, we have seen involved in corruption, bribery, and scandals. Since taking office in 2016, Temer has been dogged by a series of corruption charges. All politicians are corrupt. Let's be clear about that. People are waking up to the corruption. The Brazilian leader survived a key lower house of Congress vote in October last year to avoid facing trial. Brazil is already suffering from the aftermath of a deep recession and political instability ahead of the general elections in October. We are not only here for the truck drivers, but for all Brazilians who are suffering with the rises in electricity, water, gas, everything. Evaldier Andrade, truck driver, told Al Jazeera, Brazilians have to work just to survive. We are not members of any political party. We're the people who are suffering the most. Well, welcome to the modern world, Mr. Andrade, where most people have to work merely to survive as we move into a much more feudal, caste-oriented system. Now, this gets back into one of the topics that I broached earlier on in the show, which is who controls the planet and who gives the marching orders for almost every single government on the planet and what to do. It is the black nobility. Roughly 300 people who call the shots. And they are mostly located in houses. When I say houses, I'm talking like the House of Windsor, the House of Habsburg, in Europe. And they're the ones that call the shots. Bottom line. So if they say to Brazil, because Brazil, even though they've got their BRICS deal going on, Brazil's part of the IMF and Brazil's part of the World Bank. And if a country is basically told to raise prices on certain key elements and certain key items, they're going to do it. Or else they're going to have their aid cut off, or they're going to have the percentages on their whatever. They'll be, or the leaders will be drummed out. I mean, this is what happens. And so they'll follow orders. And what we might wind up seeing here, and I talked about this when I did the webinar with Astrolata, and I talked about one of the things that we're going to see with Saturn and Capricorn. That's going to be strikes. And we're seeing it now, and we're going to see more of these over the course of the next 2 years. And I believe we're going to see at some point in the not too distant future, and I would go on record, 2020 is going to be the year. And we get into that Saturn-Pluto conjunction, we're going to see massive worldwide strikes. Like the world is going to be grinding down. And that's not necessarily because the people, like today, let's just say, we were all telepathically connected. And we all just agreed not to work anymore. Like today. We would bring the system to a halt. It would take about 35, 40 days before, and this would not be one of these synthetic kinds of strikes or movements. And all of a sudden they'd be begging people to come back to work and spend their money. And I've long, long, long championed this as an idea for social change. It's to do nothing. So I'm not doing this. I'm not sending my kid to that school. I'm not going to turn on that TV. I'm not going to go to work. We're going to shut it down. And that's about the best recourse that we have as people. You want to change the world, do nothing. Like in a very Taoist kind of way, right? But it takes a number of people, probably take about 35% of the population, in order to pull something like that off. But instead, what we're going to get is we're going to get these strikes now. And some of the strikes will be organic, like striking for the cost of fuel. And some of them will be synthetic, promulgated. But I would say 2020, by the time we hit 2020, we're going to see large numbers of striking people. And it could actually grind the planet to a halt, and not in a good way. So we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg with that now in Brazil. They're not going back. They want more. They got 60 days worth of better fuel costs so they can make a bit more money. Well, at some point, Brazil is a hard place to drive a truck, by the way. It's not easy. You're driving in areas that have not always the best roads. And it's such a wide kind of array of like topography. So it's not easy to drive a truck in Brazil. I don't see them being replaced by automatic or self-driving trucks anytime soon. Not in that country. You get a corridor highway from Mexico to Canada where nobody's on it, you can have self-driving trucks. And that's going to happen at some point. Okay, real quick here as we kind of wrap up the news section of today. The United States is warning Syria not to defend itself in southern Syria. How about that? Don't defend yourself. That's now the news warning. Israel says, we're there, we're going to stay there, we're not leaving. And the brazen and open aggression towards the Syrians reaches a new level. Don't you love it? I don't. Just get the hell out of there. Get out of there. And by the way, there are people that aren't going to like what I'm going to say. A lot of people think Vladimir Putin. David, I know you listen to my podcast, and I know you're a big Putin guy. I'm just not a big Putin guy. I think he's done some mildly interesting things, but when you get into the networks, when you see the networks, you can see that all these people are freaking connected. They're connected. They're all connected. So I don't think Putin is some kind of lone ranger. Has he helped turn Russia around? Absolutely. Absolutely. But Putin is not who he says he is. Nobody at that level really is. It's all facade. Let's do a little time tunnel. Let's get into the time tunnel. Before that, let's see what we have in the chat room. Let's see. Maury says, keep the population at a survival level, priority number one. At all times, you have a low energy level society, no time for inner work. Is the keeping of body and soul together as a primary. Exactly. You keep people in survival mode. There's no way they have any amount of time to really look at what they're doing, how they're living their lives, the choices they make. You're absolutely right. I think, by the way, Maury, the solution to this is, and this is maybe something that could be explored with Pluto and Aquarius, are families actually joining together and, getting a piece of land or at the very least larger living structures so that three families can kind of incorporate their lives and pull their resources together and actually work less. And I've always been kind of a proponent of that. It has to be the right combination. You have to be with the right people. But that's a way to deal with the system. I remember a long time ago, I was trying to find a place to live. I was bouncing up and down the northwestern part of this country. And I answered an ad. It was in Portland, and I answered an ad in the paper to live in this household. I didn't know what was going on there. I thought it was just a room. I didn't have any money at that time, too. I was just like flying by the seat of my pants. So I go to this house, and it was a really interesting place. And it was run by basically, I guess for all intents and purposes, what I would call older, without the derogatory term associated with hippies. But they were very organized. So they were very together, and they had this really big house, and they had a lot across the street that was actually, and this is in like northeastern Portland, which is not, to this day, still not the best area, but they had a lot there across the street, and that was their farm, and they were growing vegetables. Like this was and I met with the head of this household, and the head of this community. The guy was interesting. And he asked me who I was, what I was doing, and why I wanted to live there, and da-da-da-da-da. And we had this conversation. I told him about Findhorn, and I'd been to Findhorn, and it wasn't a fit. It was not a fit. He knew it wasn't a fit, and I'm glad that he didn't say, yeah, you could live here, because it wasn't a fit for me at that time. Like I wasn't ready for that kind of model. But one of the things he said, he was very clear. He says, and it was funny because he was missing part of his index finger. And he said, we are not into the system, man. We are anti-system. We sit here, we're kind of off the grid. We take care of each other. We love each other. We watch out for each other's kids. We're here to be free. And if we want, if two of us want to go take a vacation or go somewhere, and they have kids, we'll watch the kids for them. We all pitch in, we got each other's back. This is the model that we're creating right here. And I actually think that there's a lot of merit to that. And if we have any chance of surviving and getting through like the next decade, especially economically, we're going to have to look at that kind of a model. Because what's going to happen is that if we don't adjust accordingly by scale, then that model will be enforced upon us, right? It'll be the 2030 model where we're living in, the Emerald Cities, because that's the economic and the social model that's going to be scaled out to us. Or we could branch out and we could actually look at buying things together with people. And I would say probably the 2 to 3, I'd say the 3-family model would be sort of the best model that's suitable. And you have enough people on that land, and then you could, be able to live your life accordingly. It doesn't even have to be like out in the country, wilderness somewhere. You could do this somewhere in suburbia if you've got the right model and the right household or the right land or the right accommodations, because people need some space. But if we want to get beyond this survival economy, we're going to have to pull together in some ways and make each other's lives easier, which I think would be great, because then we could actually get closer together. We won't be so isolated in our own experience. And if we don't do it, it's going to be done for us. That's my sense. That's my 2 cents. Monolithic dome homes. I like dome homes. I mean, you could even get like the tiny homes. Tiny homes are fine. Get a plot of land and get a bunch of tiny homes. You could actually bring, but the whole idea here is you have to be aligned with the people that you're with. It takes really good choice making, because what you don't want is, and there's going to be growth involved. People will grow. People have to face themselves and deal with like their ego issues, and who knows what comes up, That's the way life is. That's the way life is. I think that's a model that we could move towards, and it would help a lot of people who are at the survival level. And it's hard to watch. It's really hard to watch. But we've been de-incentivized to do things like that, because somebody's always going to come along and change it, whether it's Obama or Trump or QAnon. And that's just a fallacy. It's a total fallacy. By the way, I'm going to give you an update, a little local update here in Fredericksburg. On June 4th, they're meeting here to up the level of fluoride in the water. Now, Fredericksburg has fluoride already in the water. It's like naturally occurring fluoride. Well, they had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and they had 4 dentists roll out here and basically, talk about all the wonderful virtues of fluoride. Well, they're going to have another meeting on Monday, which I'll be attending, and I'm bringing in a hired gun. This is a friend/client of mine from Austin, who's a dentist and is an anti-fluoride activist dentist. And she's going to come into town next Monday. So we're organizing now. We're going to organize around this anti-fluoride piece, or this fluoride piece. So I'm just sharing with you that I may espouse these things, but I also am in the process of putting my mouth where my money is. So I'm going to get involved here, and this is a stance that I can get involved and feel strongly about. So I'm just giving you a heads up, that I'm not just a talking head. I'm going to get involved, and this is the process now. And I urge, and I'll give you guys updates, and it could be one of those things where it's going to be very enlightening for me, and I may just see that, what happens on a local level is really a microcosm of what happens on a much bigger level, and that's okay. I'm willing to live with that. I'm willing to look at the process and not feel like, oh yeah, we're going to stop this thing in its tracks. And we may not, but I'll learn about what goes on in the process And I think that's important. So I urge any number of you to actually go out and well, today is May 29th. May 29th is 149th day of the year. 150 in leap years. There are 216 days remaining until the end of the year. All right, let's go back in time. Let's see, the Roman Emperor, this is back in 363. The Roman Emperor Julian defeats the Sasanian army in the Battle of Ctesiphon. Is that it? Hold on. Oh, this is a hard word to say. Pronounce. Ctesiphon. Under the walls of the Sasanian capital, but is unable to take the city. Let's see what else we have here. In 1167, the Battle of Monte Porzio, a Roman army supporting Pope Alexander III, is defeated by Christian of Buck and Reynold of Dassel. How'd you like to be the Roman army that's beaten by Christian of Buke? It's Buke. And Reynold of Dassel. That's an upset. I wonder what the over-under was for that one. What the point spread was. That's towards the end of the Roman Empire. I probably would have taken the odds and gone with Christian of Buke and Reynold of Dassel. 1176, it is the Battle of Legnano. The Lombard League defeats Emperor Frederick I. It's a big day here, 1453. It is the fall of Constantinople. Ottoman armies under Sultan Mehmed II Fatih captured Constantinople after a 53-day siege, ending the Byzantine Empire, which was the outcrop of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire lasted for a lot longer through the Byzantine operation, the Operation of Byzantium. 1660, English Restoration. Charles II is restored to the throne of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Oh, let's see what else we have here. 1790, Rhode Island becomes the last of the original United States colonies to ratify the Constitution and is admitted as the 13th U.S. state. Well, happy birthday, Rhode Island. I like Rhode Island. Although it was not a great place for the slave trade. In fact, it was the center of the slave trade in this country. 1798, United Irishman Rebellion. Between 300 and 500 United Irishmen are executed as rebels by the British Army in County Kildare, Ireland. In 1807, Mustafa IV becomes the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and the Caliph of Islam. How'd you like to be that guy? Mustafa IV. You're ruling over the Ottoman Empire and you are the Caliph of Islam? Man. That's reaching the Capricornian pinnacle, isn't it? Hey, happy birthday, Wisconsin. Today's your birthday as well. You and Rhode Island share the same birthday. Today, Wisconsin, you're admitted as the 30th state in the Union. Let's see. What else we have here? 1864, Emperor Maximilian I of Mexico arrives in Mexico for the very first time. In 1903, in the May coup, Alexander I, King of Serbia, and Queen Draga. Okay, the Draga Queen are assassinated in Belgrade. by the Black Hand, the CMA RUCA organization. The Black Hand. On this day, 1913, one of the most pivotal days in history, Igor Stravinsky's ballet score, The Rite of Spring, receives its premiere performance in Paris, provoking a riot. We could do a whole show on The Rite of Spring. It is the pagan call for the 20th century. The pagan hymn of the 20th, it was more than that, it was pagan pageant. It was, the Rite of Spring is an occult operation. You look at the people that were involved in the production of that. It's a who's who of esoterica and occult operators. Nicholas Rourke was involved in the Rite of Spring. Very interesting. Maybe we'll do something on Friday with the Farcast with the Rite of Spring. Let's see. What else do we have here? Wow, back in 1914, the ocean liner RMS, Empress of Ireland, sinks in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. 1,012 lives are lost. That's a big loss. Don't hear too much about that, do you, in history? It's always Lusitania, Titanic. Let's see. Oh. 6 years after the Rite of Spring, Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity is tested, later confirmed, by Arthur Eddington and Andrew Claude de la Chaux-Crommelin. So we have the Rite of Spring and the theory of relativity basically on the same day. Isn't that interesting? Okay, what else? Michael Shiru, 1931, a citizen of the United States is executed by Italian military firing squad for intent to kill Benito Mussolini. Should have gotten a radio show like Ezra Pound did. What else do we have here? Wow, this is a big day in history, to be honest with you. In 1953, Edmund Hillary and his Sherpa pal Tenzing Norgay become the first people to reach the summit of Mount Everest on Tenzing Norgay's adopted 39th birthday. So we have Hillary getting to the top of Everest, we have the Rite of Spring, and we have the theory of relativity, all today on May 29th. How about that? 1973, Tom Bradley, elected first black mayor, Los Angeles. I'll never forget Tom Bradley during the Rodney King riots. That dude was in a trance. Big time. You watch it. You go back and you look at anything, any kind of footage with the Rodney King riots. Tom Bradley is either drugged out of his mind or he's in a trance or both, as Daryl Gates ran rampant with the city for roughly 72 hours. Let's see, what else? Oh, it's a great day for the Brits, because on this day, today, back in 1982, they defeated the Argentines at the Battle of Goose Green and the Falkland Islands. Let's see, what else do we have here? 1988, U.S. President Ronald Reagan begins his first visit to the Soviet Union when he arrives in Moscow for a superpower summit with the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. What's Gorbachev up to these days? He's a Pisces. Gorbachev is a Pisces. Gorby. Okay, what else do we have here? 1990, just 2 years after that, Boris Yeltsin is elected as president of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. Let's see. Anything else interesting? In 2001, the Supreme Court rules that disabled golfer Casey Martin can use a cart to ride in tournaments. That was such a big deal. 2004, National World War II Memorial is dedicated in Washington, D.C. Today's a big earthquake day. A doublet earthquake of combined 6.1 magnitude strikes Iceland near the town of Selfoss, injuring 30 people. And 4 years later, in 2012, a 5.8 magnitude earthquake hits northern Italy near Bologna, killing at least 24 people. In history, births today include Virginia de' Medici in 1568, the Italian princess. G.K. Chesterton, the English poet, essayist, he was born on this day in 1874. Oswald Spengler, the German historian, philosopher, esotericist, and one of the hidden hands behind the rise of the Third Reich, was born in 1880 on this day. One of the great handlers and pedophiles of our time, Bob Hope, was born in 1903. Leslie Towns Hope. Let's see who else is born today. Stacy Keach, the American actor, Stacy Keach Sr. That's Stacy Keach's father. Of course, Tenzing Norgay, his adopted birthday. 1917, John F. Kennedy was born on this day, 1917, which would make Mr. Kennedy 101 years old on this day today. How about that? This whole thing that JFK is actually Jimmy Carter is such bullshit. Sorry, unless you believe in clones, there's no way Jimmy Carter is 101 years old. Let's see what we have here. Let's talk about Kennedy a little bit. I don't want to just skip over that. Kennedy. So there's a lot of stuff coming out now about the Kennedy assassination, and Robert Kennedy Jr. came out, was about a day ago or 2 days ago, saying that Sirhan didn't shoot his father, and that is true. So that involves a conspiracy. And as a result, some of the stuff around the Kennedy assassination is surfacing and resurfacing. And there are people who have a wide variety of opinions on what happened with Kennedy and who killed Kennedy. And I think that it was a team effort. This is my opinion, that Kennedy pissed off a large number of people. If you look at, and I've talked about this before, if you look at his rise to the presidency, would not have happened without the intervention of a couple of different people or a couple of different groups. So his old man, who was a gangster, Let me just be clear about that. Joe Kennedy Sr. was a gangster. He was an interesting character, to say the least. But he knew all these guys. You know, he knew the Bronfmans, and he knew Meyer Lansky, and he knew Onassis. They were all buddies of his. It's really hard to find direct evidence that the Kennedys were rum runners. You can find indirect evidence, but the sort of the alternative or the hidden hand of history suggests that they had speakeasies in Boston during Prohibition, which is when they made a ton of money. This is when the old man made his fortune. And he also owned movie theaters. He was involved in the movie business. The old man left the family, went to California, and was in the movie business. And who did he have an affair with? Was it Jean Harlow or somebody like that? He was having an affair with an actress in L.A. Then he sold the theaters and he went back to Boston. But he made all kinds of connections, and he was buying rum from the Bronfmans. I'm sorry, Canadian whiskey from the Bronfmans. The Bronfmans were a key family in bringing Canadian whiskey down into the country for Prohibition. Rum was coming from South America, not only, but through the Onassis shipping line. So this is where Kennedy got to know Onassis. And apparently Onassis was actually bringing other things up from South America as well, including heroin. And that's how he made his fortune. So Joe Kennedy knew all these people. They were his business partners. Joe Kennedy was also involved in the collapse of Wall Street. He was in with these guys. He had stocks. He had stocks on Wall Street. And Joe Kennedy was one of the people that pulled their stocks out because they knew that the crash was coming. They got out months before the crash was going to happen. They surreptitiously sold their stocks. So when the crash hit, they weren't affected by it. And then they went back in and they bought all those stocks on pennies on the dollar and became uber rich all over again. He's part of that group. And so when he wanted to have his son become president, he made deals. He made deals with the Gambino family. He made deals with Meyer Lansky. Meyer Lansky being the head of the Jewish mafia, Gambino family, part of the Italian mafia. The two are connected at the hip. So JFK made a deal. And the deal was that JFK was going to leave the Italian mafia alone. He was going to leave the Israelis alone. He was going to honor the nation state of Israel. They were going to create nuclear weapons at Dimona. And as soon as Kennedy got elected, he started crossing swords with Israel. David Ben-Gurion, it's on record, couldn't stand him. They were sharing Marilyn Monroe. He and Bobby were sharing Marilyn Monroe with Sam Giancana, who was one of the Gambino family's crime bosses, one of their lieutenants. And then Bobby started to go after the mob. He started to go after racketeering. You look at like the trials and the investigation into racketeering and the mob in the early 60s. It's a big deal. We never see those trials anymore. I think John Gotti was kind of the last of the Godfathers. All that stuff has been streamlined, co-opted, and incorporated. But they started to piss people off. And they pissed off the Italian mob. Certainly, they pissed off Israel, and they pissed off Meyer Lansky. So when it came to taking both of them out, they had a lot of cooperation. Pissed off the CIA. He didn't like the CIA because he was on to the CIA. And JFK was going to do a lot of different things. I got into this conversation last night with my buddy Robert Bonomo. We agreed to disagree. He thought it was just the CIA who were the banksters, company. And they are. I mean, CIA is kind of a company for hire. But in this instance, there were people that had agendas. And they had vendettas, and they wanted him out. And look, whether or not you think that JFK survived or not, because Miles Mathis thinks that he survived. Well, I can tell you for a fact that I had a client whose husband was the brain trauma surgeon in Dallas when they brought JFK in. Okay? That's a fact, Jack. So you can put all these things together and say he never died and they just took him out. I'm just giving you an alternative piece of evidence. And the other thing, too, does it really matter whether he died or not? Because the same thing happened. I mean, whether or not he actually physically died, he metaphysically died. And it forked us off into a new direction, forked us off into a different timeline, which I've talked about before. So today's the day. Let us honor somebody who was extremely flawed. Don't get me wrong. But he was getting turned on. He was dosing. He was dosing with Mary Pinchot Myers, right? Mary Pinchot Myers. Wife of Cord Meyer. Mary Pinchot Meyer, it's singular. Anybody else born today that was interesting? Oh, how about this? John Hinckley Jr., born the same day as JFK. Can't make this shit up, can you? Crazy, huh? Totally crazy. Today is LaToya Jackson's birthday. Probably the most batshit crazy of all the Jacksons. Let's see. Anybody else today? Noel Gallagher, Oasis. Happy birthday, Noel. I think that's about it. I think that's about it. There's a lot of like modern people. I'm not that into modern people. Well, today's Carmelo Anthony's birthday. I don't really care. It's not that interesting. All right, let's get on out of here. Okay, you've been listening to Robert Phoenix and 15 Minutes of Flame. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, there we go. Robert Phoenix, 15 Minutes of Flame. And I'll be back tomorrow, 24 hours from today. Use your head to discern what's real and your heart truly to stay open.